3 days of testimony and more than 3 hours of deliberations, the jury found former police officer Michael Rosfeld not guilty in the shooting death of Antwon Rose II.
Latest of our teen coverage continues this morning with Bob Allen covering police preparations for the possibility of additional protests. And we begin with Megan Schiller live downtown with reaction to the verdict. Megan?
Good morning. Every single morning this week, police officer patrol cars lined the base of the courthouse. And it's a pretty eerie feeling that they aren't here this morning after that verdict was reached late last night. The jury deliberating for a little more than 3 hours and coming back with a verdict, a unanimous verdict, that they wanted to acquit former East Pittsburgh police officer Michael Rosfeld. They were given 5 options by the judge: acquittal, first-degree murder, third-degree murder, voluntary manslaughter, and involuntary manslaughter. Ultimately, the jury reaching a verdict of not guilty. In the moments after, we saw strong emotions and outrage on the steps of the courthouse. Supporters of Antwon Rose II asked why the big rush to come to a decision. One community activist also argued that the jury was brought in from a conservative part of the state. He said others believed that the jury rushed to a decision to get back home after a week-long trial. We talked with the attorneys on both sides after the verdict was read.
I think that there was enough evidence in this case to merit longer deliberation and more consideration of the entire evidence, given the gravity of the situation. I've said repeatedly throughout this trial that the humanity of Antwon Rose wasn't put on display. And I think that if they were considering that they were valuing the life of a beautiful, intelligent, valuable member of this community, then it should have been afforded more time.
I give this jury a lot of credit. This was a very hard case. You know, I would point out to you that this was not an all-white jury. There are African Americans on this jury. They listened to the facts, they listened to the law, and in my opinion, they rendered the correct verdict. And I'm gonna say this right now. You know, this case had nothing to do with race, absolutely nothing to do with race. And certain people in this city have made it that way, and it's sad.
And we would like to point out that Tomasi had said earlier in the week that if it had been a black police officer and a white victim, that possibly things would have been different. Now, Rosfeld was seen tearing up when that verdict was read. It's not necessarily over for him yet. The Rose family does have a civil case that they are filing against him in conjunction with this, but it is likely that this verdict will bolster his defense in that civil case as well. We're live outside the courthouse. Megan Schiller, KDK News.
Protesters upset about the verdict took to the streets overnight. They were out as hundreds blocked the intersections of Forbes and Murray. They were chanting, some were holding signs saying there was no justice for Antwon Rose II.
And Pittsburgh is not stronger than hate. That's the thing. Pittsburgh loves to make this thing like we're stronger than hate. Pittsburgh is not stronger than hate because hate lives right here. Hate just happened here a few months ago.
Protesters also said they're upset that Antwon Rose's family is hurting, and they believe the shooting was racially motivated. They also spray-painted a portion of the street with a logo that simply reads J4A, or Justice for Antwon. As a safety precaution, there were salt trucks set up blocking the entrance to the Zone 5 police headquarters on Washington Boulevard. Last night, those were there, saying in an effort to keep everyone safe.
Well, Pittsburgh police say that they're prepared to keep everyone safe, including demonstrators and residents, business owners, and visitors following that verdict. Bob Allen continues our team coverage this morning with more on how police are preparing for this. Bob?
Well, Brenda, we know that Pittsburgh police are working 12-hour shifts today. It's all in an effort to keep as many officers on the streets and in the zones as possible. The main goal is to keep the city safe now that a verdict has been reached in the Michael Rosfeld trial. Antwon Rose's mother has asked demonstrators to stand down. Last night there were several peaceful demonstrations. One was in downtown, and then it led to one in East Liberty.
Someone's dead, someone's child is dead, and there's nothing that we can do about it, and we're trying to figure out what we can. Laws need to change, and people need to listen to people of color, the people that are being affected by this. People need to listen to what they need. People need to listen to the family of Antwon and what they need and what they want to happen right now.
So we can expect us to see a strong police presence around the city, and they say it's all in an attempt to keep the demonstrators safe, along with residents, city-owned the business district, and visitors. Reporting live in the Strip District, Bob Allen, KDKA News.
Okay, so y'all just heard that pretty extensive news clip right there, and let me just say that I am not in the least bit shocked or surprised by this verdict, but also let me offer my condolences again to Antwon Rose's family. I remember when I first talked about this story when it first happened back in 2017, if I'm not mistaken, and when I was reading through everything that came out about it, I said this could have easily been avoided. As a matter of fact, a lot of these events like this could be avoided, but they don't want to avoid it. This is just the nature of the establishment we live in. And let me just say this right now, the American justice system, or if you want to call it that, especially when it pertains to black people, is nothing but one big ass flightless ass skank, a straight up strag, as the Grinch would say. That's what it is. Let's be real and 100%, 100,000% to be honest with this. This whole system was never designed for us to prosper in. It was made to bury us. It was made to break us down. It was made to destroy us. We get very minimal victories. And I do mean very minimal. I'm sorry, when I'm saying minimal, I'm talking about it's probably the size of a grain of salt. It's that small. So I'm not in the least bit shocked or surprised by this. And the reporter actually made a good point. They said if this was a black cop that killed a white person, then it would have went a whole nother way. And she's right, because guess what? If y'all remember back in Louisiana, the two black cops that pulled over that white guy who was on that high-speed chase with his 6-year-old, or was it 7-year-old son in the front seat who had autism. That white guy tried to use his vehicle as a weapon. The guy shot through the window. He didn't know the boy was in the front seat. One of the bullets went through the chair and went and hit the boy in the back of the head. Ended up killing him. They ended up sending the cop who shot through that window to jail for 40 years, and nothing happened to the dad until he got hit with some domestic abuse charges that following year. The guy already had a rap sheet and a record, but they decided to throw the book at one of their officers, and they did not waste any time because they were fired. They didn't get paid administrative leave. They just threw the book at them, and within a couple days we knew their names and we saw their mugshots. That rarely happens, if ever, when a white cop does that. They will stretch it out, and we probably won't know who they are until like the following week. But we found out about who those two cops were that same week that happened, literally days apart from the actual incident. So that reporter was actually right in her assessment with that. And then you can throw, what's the name, Muhammad Noor in there. He's not even ADOS. But to them, he was black enough when he killed that Justine, however the hell you pronounce her last name, because I'm not going to call her by the name that they want us to call her by. She wasn't married. And she was not even from here. She was from Australia and was only here for what, like 3 years? So yeah, that was a strong point that she actually made. Now, I believe, and I could be wrong, when Michael Rosfeld shot Antwon Rose and they asked him why did he shoot him, his response, and I could be wrong, but I don't think I was, because I think people were sending me things, was, I don't know. That's a very shaky response to give. He didn't give the typical, I feared for my life. He didn't give that. It says that Antwon Rose II was shot and killed after running away from police after the vehicle he was in was was pulled over for being suspected of being involved in a drive-by shooting minutes earlier. Now, when he was shot, it was off camera because, you know, they had residential neighborhood cameras. So when you look at the clip, the only thing you see, or the last time you see Antwon Rose, is when he's running away from Michael Rosfeld and Michael Rosfeld chasing after him. And then you don't see anything else after that. You just hear gunshots. I bet you any amount of money, if Michael Rosfeld had a body camera, he didn't have it on. I'm almost certain of it because I've never seen anything come from that body camera, if he even had one. They said that jury was given 5 possible verdicts, and they went with the not guilty one. Now, what does that tell you? The 5 possible verdicts were not guilty, first degree manslaughter, first degree murder, third degree murder, voluntary manslaughter, and involuntary manslaughter, and they chose not guilty. And the nerve of that dorky ass attorney he has up there saying this had nothing to do with race because we had African Americans on the jury, and you know, shut the fuck up. Just because there were black people on the jury, I got a question for him. How many black people were on that jury? I bet he won't tell that. I bet you it was probably no more than 2. And the rest of them were probably lily white. You might have had an Asian up in there, maybe a Latino, and that's it. It wasn't no OJ trial jury. I know that's for damn sure. They'll probably never repeat something like that. I hope that Michael Rosfeld does not get employed ever the fuck again. Let his ass stay broke and unemployed for the rest of his days. As far as I'm concerned, he can hit the financial wall and I wouldn't give a damn. Now, they said that the family is going to file a civil suit. And you know what? Before they even mentioned that there's a chance that they will not win, I already knew they weren't going to because of the outcome from this case. So at this point, and I don't want to sound rude, but at this point, the family probably is wasting their time. If they could not get him on this, they're not going to get him on that civil one. It's kind of hard to get one without the other. It's rare. It rarely happens. Because if they couldn't find him guilty on the main case, it's going to be hard to get him guilty on the civil suit. Because they like, well, we found him not guilty of this, so what's the point of finding him guilty on this? Like, they're going to say what was really violated. This is yet again another case where the victim has become the perp. So, you know, there's no justice for the family. And, you know, that, like I said, that's not surprising in this establishment. It really is. Black people get just as few, and I do mean few, and very far in between when it comes to situations such as this. It's almost a sigh of relief when we actually do, when a cop actually is brought to justice, you know, for what they've done. The last one we talked about was the cop down in Florida who killed that black motorist back in, what was it, 2016, 17, 15, one of those 3? I think it was 15. But guess what? If you look at him, they wouldn't identify him as white. So you got to really, you know, think about that. And of course, you know, with the Jason Van Dyke thing, but that was a slap on the wrist, and they keep treating him with kid gloves and shit. Now, that's another one who, now I'm not even going to say it on here, but Michael Rosfeld, I hope your life becomes a living hell. I hope it is a nightmare. And not because of how people were treating you or talking about you for what you did, but because of the actual act in what you did. I bet he probably said to himself he's going to sleep pretty good at night knowing that he took a so-called thug off the street. That's probably what was going through his mind. And like one of the protesters said, they live in a city that's not above hate. They just had a hate crime happen there a few months ago. She was talking about that Pittsburgh shooter who shot up that mosque, who was a white guy. Now crazy, they brought him to justice immediately because of who he killed. Now, when Dylan Roof shot and killed those people in that church in Charleston back in 2015, Not only did he lead them on a high-speed chase to get his ass, but they took him to Burger King, to Burger fucking King, to get a meal. I have not seen anyone do that before, nor after something like that has happened. And they try to lie to us and say, well, it's customary sometimes that we do that. We haven't seen anyone else in any other jurisdiction around this establishment do that for anyone except him. So that's how I knew they were lying. I guess they were saying, well, that was a job well done. Let's just treat him to a meal. And then before that, South Carolina didn't have a hate crime law. A lot of these states don't. And it's a reason as to why they don't. Because they know that if they can prove that there's a hate crime, that hate crime law will literally drive them up the wall. That's just like when a lot of states don't have the death penalty. That's why they had to send Dylan Roof all the way to fucking, what was it, Indiana or somewhere? They had to just send him somewhere until it's time for them to put the damn needle in his arm. Whenever that'll be, because whenever someone's on death row, they don't get put to death the same year they put them on death row. Sometimes it can go 5, 10, 15, maybe even 20 years. I just did a video talking about the guy who I'm trying to get his name right. Y'all know who I'm talking about. The one who in Texas who was dragged, and when he was dragged, his limbs came off. They're just now about to put the needle in his arm next month. And I can't wait for them to put him down either, like the dog he is. And that happened back in 98. We're talking 21 years before they actually deal with him the right way. So he's been sitting on death row for 21 years. And they're finally going to put the needle in his arm next month. I think at the end of April. But it's fucked up. It's not surprising. It's not shocking. It is very disappointing, as usual. Because it's a slap in the face. This guy got a slap on the wrist, and the family got a slap in the face. Again. The entire black community did. But y'all let me know what you think about this down in the comments, and I'll talk to you in the next one.